According to the creation myth found in the Kojiki, the deity siblings Izanagi and Izanami descended to Earth with divine orders to shape the land. Izanagi dipped a jeweled spear into the primordial ocean, stirring up the waters. When he pulled the spear out, the brine that dripped from its tip piled up and solidified, creating the first land, Onogorojima. I'm going to be laying a little bit of groundwork with this video. I'm going to be covering a very brief and broad introduction to Japanese geography, topography, and climate. This is not going to be even close to comprehensive. There's going to be a lot of information I leave out. If you are interested in looking into these topics more, my sources are in the description. I just wanted to cover some of the main points for those who might just be getting interested in Japan and maybe haven't learned a whole lot about it yet, and provide a basic idea of what Japan, the place, and its natural setup is, and also to set the stage moving forward, talking about human society and history and civilization in Japan, because the course of human history was certainly influenced by things such as geography, topography, climate, weather, and such. Until roughly 15 million years ago, the land that would become the islands of Japan was still connected to the Eurasian continent. This land was mostly underwater, and it was fairly flat at that time. As the land separated from the Eurasian continent, it eventually came to rest off the east coast. Japan now sits at the intersection of multiple tectonic plates. On the Sea of Japan side, the Eurasian plate is pushing eastward. On the Pacific side, the Pacific and Philippine plates are pushing westward. The pressure from opposite directions from these plates compress the land and push it up from under the ocean. Japan consists of thousands of islands across an arcing archipelago. However, 98% of its land surface is found on 4 main islands. The northernmost island is Hokkaido. North of Hokkaido, there are the Kuril Islands. They are administered by Russia. Since 1945, however, Japan has disputed this and claimed rights to a couple of the islands. I decided I should mention them so that viewers would be aware, because some sources will include these as part of Japan and some will not. The next island heading south from Hokkaido is Honshu. It is the largest of the main islands and where the majority of Japan's population lives. The smallest of the 4 main islands is Shikoku. It is also the least populated of the main islands. The most southern of the 4 main islands is Kyushu. These 4 main islands make up what some people refer to as Japan proper. These 4 islands stretch across 1,660 kilometers, with a land surface of 375,000 kilometers square. In total, Japan is over 3,000 kilometers in length and has a land surface of a little more than 377,000 kilometers square. This shows how tiny many of the other islands are. Although the length of the archipelago nearly doubles, the surface increases only by a relatively small amount. There are also other smaller island chains that are part of Japan. Off the east coast of Honshu, in the general area of the Kanto Plain, are the Izu Islands. Farther out into the Pacific Ocean, approaching the Mariana Islands, are the Bonin Islands, also known as the Ogasawara Islands. To the south of Kyushu are the Ryukyu Islands. They stretch almost to Taiwan. The largest and most famous of these islands is Okinawa. In addition to the smaller island chains, there are also islets. Sado Island is off the west coast of Honshu. Tsushima Island is off the north coast of Kyushu and is between Kyushu and Korea. One of the most dominant topographical features of Japan is the large number of mountains there is. 65 to 86% of land surface is classified as mountainous. This large difference exists because the exact statistic depends on how mountains, plains, etc. are defined and classified by those compiling the numbers. It is common to hear statistics such as 75 or 80% being mountains. Looking at this elevation map of Japan, it is quite easy to see the volume of mountains that stands out. The mountains were created by tectonic stress pushing on the land and continuing to push on it, causing it to buckle up and over a long period of time become mountains and hills. Japanese mountains tend to be made of hard rock and have sharp, rugged, angular terrain. The change in angle from the surrounding lowlands to mountain bases can be quite dramatic. Angles of 35 to 40 degrees are normal. Higher up from the base, mountains typically have an angle greater than 15 degrees. Mountains in Japan tend to be relatively short compared to many others across the world. Other than in the Japan Alps, mountains almost never exceed 3,000 meters in elevation. This is because they are pretty young compared to a lot of other mountains in the world. They are still increasing in elevation, but it is in minuscule increments over long periods of time. The largest concentration of mountains is in the Chubu region of central Honshu. The Chubu region is made up of 9 prefectures: Aichi, Fukui, Gifu, Ishikawa, Nagano, Niigata, Shizuoka, Toyama, and Yamanashi. It is in the Chubu region that the Japan Alps are located. The Japan Alps is a group of 3 mountain ridges: Hida, Kiso, and Akaishi. It is where you will find most of Japan's highest and most rugged and extreme mountains. There are hundreds of volcanoes on the Japanese islands. Out of these, roughly 60 are still active, which means Japan is home to 7 to 8% of the world's active volcanoes. Volcanoes are created by subduction, where the oceanic plates are drawn under the continental plate. This creates channels through which magma can flow into mountains, creating volcanic cones. It also creates upward pressure that pushes the magma through those channels. The pressure inside the cone builds up until it inevitably erupts. As seen in the previous map, volcanoes are spread out all across the islands. However, they are concentrated in Kyushu, Hokkaido, and the western periphery of the Kanto Plain. Over time, volcanic eruptions spread lava, ash, and glassy rock-like debris such as obsidian across 40% of Japan's land surface. The most active volcano in Japan is Sakurajima in Kyushu, and the most famous active volcano is Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji is also Japan's highest mountain, with an elevation of 3,776 meters. One of the things that should already be apparent is that there is relatively little flat land in Japan. Plains are mostly spread out, small, and isolated along coastlines and in mountain basins. Most of the major plains are located on the Pacific side of Honshu. They were created by deposits from mountains or by erosion. Plains in Japan are not completely flat, and it is common for there to be terraces and hilly uplands. Plains located in mountain basins typically have a small amount of genuinely flat land, and are more likely to be smooth, slightly inclined land. Lowlands are scattered and small, but because they usually have a high content of mineral-rich sediment and volcanic ash, they tend to be fertile. The largest plain in Japan is the Kanto Plain, which is roughly 17,000 square kilometers in area. Some of the other major plains include the Abeno Plain in Osaka Prefecture, the Nobi Plain in Aichi and Gifu Prefectures, Osaka Plain in Osaka and Hyogo Prefectures, and the Sarobetsu Plain in Hokkaido Prefecture. The climate of Japan can vary from subarctic to subtropical, but most of Japan is in the temperate zone. Much of the country has 4 distinct seasons, and more or less follow the trends of the rest of the temperate northern hemisphere. Climate is impacted by continental and oceanic factors. The continental factors mainly influence temperature, and the oceanic factors impact precipitation and humidity. Japan is in the northeast tip of the Asian monsoon zone. Annual precipitation can range from 1,000 to 4,000 millimeters depending on the area, and Japan typically has higher precipitation than the global average. There are 3 seasons of particularly heavy precipitation. September and October are typhoon season, which brings a large amount of rain along with the damaging winds. In winter, heavy snow falls on the Sea of Japan side of Honshu, particularly in the northern Tohoku region, but the Pacific side remains relatively clear with limited snowfall except in the Tohoku region. June and July is the rainy season with persistent rainfall. Hundreds of rivers, streams, and lakes are a plentiful source of fresh water. Rivers and streams are typically short and shallow. Because they run from mountains down onto the lower lands, they typically have a rapid water flow because of the steep slopes of the mountains. This rapid flow, combined with large amounts of precipitation, makes them susceptible to flooding. The largest lake in Japan is Lake Biwa in Shiga Prefecture. Japan experiences a number of natural disasters. Tectonic activity causes frequent earthquakes, averaging over 1,500 per year. Earthquakes also cause tsunami, massive tidal waves, steep slopes, thin soil, heavy precipitation, and high soil content of slick volcanic ash makes landslides an unpredictable concern. Earthquakes can also dislodge this already unstable soil and create landslides. In addition, there are also typhoons and volcanic eruptions that are threats. Life for the pre-modern Japanese was lived very much on the edge. Rugged topography with little arable land limited the amount of space available for agriculture. Steep mountain slopes meant that much of the mountains were minimally accessible to pre-modern humans. Tectonic activity made earthquakes, tsunami, and landslides a constant threat. Volcanic eruptions also threatened to wipe out vast areas and entire settlements. Rivers, streams, and lakes made for abundant sources of fresh water. But rivers and streams were shallow and with rapid flows had a tendency to flood when combined with high precipitation. Violent typhoons could leave devastation in their wake as they move along the islands, destroying crops and leveling buildings. In addition to these, famine, for various reasons that were not always natural, and disease were also common outbreaks across the span of pre-modern Japanese history. These issues, along with the lack of many natural resources and other factors, are some of the things that influenced how Japanese society developed in the pre-modern period. Now to the unedited, unscripted, unrehearsed portion. I want to thank everyone so much for watching this video. It's my first attempt at a full video, and it was about something that I have not really heavily studied, that I had to do a lot of research about, and I have not specialized knowledge in. I'm not a geologist or geographer or an environmental scientist, but I did a bunch of research for this video, and I had learned a bunch of technical information about these subject matters, a bit of which I didn't understand because I don't have the specialized training. So I decided to cut a lot of that out and just make this a broad video about the subject matter rather than in depth. I know this is a topic that a lot of people could probably find dry, and I didn't want the video to run too long or too bogged down with technical information and technical jargon. But I do hope that it provides a little bit of an idea of what Japan as a place is like, and it kind of sets the stage a little bit for moving forward, talking about human society and civilization. So, yeah, I don't know, it was a shot. I do really appreciate you sticking out to the end. And I really hope that you come back for later videos. Down on the bottom right of the screen is my Twitter handle, where you can follow me if you want to. So I hope that I will see you all again next time.